All right, there we go.
Okay, so here we have a typical ground-up residential development model. It has all the features that I would have put in a package that I would have worked on for a REIT project. It also has a presentation ready type of thing that an investor may want to use. You may want to use it for banks, and we'll go through all that. So first we're going to go through these blue tabs, which is all the input tabs. Then you're going to have your tabs that you're going to show to investors or, you know, even internally for presentations. And then we're going to go into our, you know, more detailed cost spreads and things like that that show like the backup of profit and loss by year and by month. So let's get started with the input tabs. So I have these three tabs. You're going to want similar information to what we went through, but more detail. And again, you can start off with less detail and then build up to it, even in this model. So I have information about my building, then I have my timing. You also have the planning period in here as well. So you can see, you know, from day one when you start putting money down all the way through opening what it looks like. That's important for calculating your IRRs. You have your cap rates. Down below here, this is a small building, so I've built it to where you can see what the average square footages are and also what the opening rents are going to be. So you'll need that information. That populates over here. And then these move-in dates are going to be used for my lease up and occupancy information. Now, if this building was much bigger, I would use this format over here, and I would build a different type of occupancy so that it still works without having specific move-in dates.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also showing a lot of times you'll have concession allowance. Typical, what I've seen in the market in the past, many years actually, they'll give like a 3 months rent to everyone coming in the first year. So that's what this is calculating. Other income would be things like, you know, if someone loses their keys, applications, pet fees, things like that. I just have a ballpark here. This could also be made more detailed. You have your operating expenses. This again, you can get from a property manager locally. You don't actually need all this detail to build this model, but in this case, I've just broken out a project that I had seen how much things cost. This has $5,100 per unit per year. A management fee could vary from 2% to 4%. I just plugged in 3% here. That's typical what I see in the DC area, as well as even up in Jersey. Down here, you have financing assumptions. This you can get from a loan officer. I'm going to be covering both the construction debt as well as refinancing. Next up is the development cost. As Greg mentioned earlier, you would work with, you could actually hire someone for pre-construction services that would give you some idea about what your construction costs will be. Or you can also, what REITs do is they'll bid out the project and they'll have different estimates from different construction firms like you're supposed to do. And then look at the bids and put the input that they find in these models so we can see which one is realistic and what makes sense for us before going forward with any general contractor. So what you would do here is just input your information. I've detailed out most of what you would see that's typical for a real estate project, like in residential, so that you have an idea of what costs you're gonna have to get from external sources. And here I'm showing also your dollars per unit and per square foot. You have your land value here. Now, always remember that this land value is always credited towards your equity if you've already purchased the land. Down below, this is feeding from another tab, but you have your interest during construction, and your mortgage that's being calculated somewhere else and feeding here. In this case, the equity requirement is 2.4. We've already put in $1 million because we already have the land, so there's another 1.4 that we have to find before the lender will give us 68% of the balance on this project. The next tab shows my cost spend. This is important for lenders as well as for yourself to know what your equity spend and then your mortgage draws are going to look like over time. An easy way to calculate this is just what I've done is I've built this formula up here where it takes your construction costs down below and spreads them by months. And it spreads it, you know, a straight line spread, but in my experience, even if you do a straight line spread, you get pretty close to what your construction interest and your equity requirements will be. And down below, I'm calculating my construction interest based on the draw. In this model, I'm assuming that all your equity will go in first and then the mortgage will kick in or your construction loan will kick in. Sometimes there are cases where you can, the lender may say, give me this much of equity, let's say your land, and then we'll go 50-50 on the equity going forward. Now, if that's the case, I would just come in here and just switch it up a little bit so that could work for you. I've just modeled here what's typical in the marketplace, which is all equity in first, then your construction loan kicks in. And down below, I have scenarios on your IRRs. There's different hold periods. This is a case where, and most models, even if you think you're going to hold it for the longest time, a lot of times you want to know what happens if I wanted to sell it in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. What does that look like? And these are in blue because you can toggle these and change them. So I can change it to, you know, what if I want to change it to the 8th year or the 7th year? What does that look like? And also your cap rate. This is controlled by an input that we put on the other page. You'll look at what the cap rate will be on the exit as well. And down below is just all the calculations. This is all automated. And this is the levered IRR. The one above was the unlevered IRR. So those are all the inputs. Now we get into all the information. So my backup sheets, I have a profit and loss by year. This is typically what you would show an investor or you would show a bank on how you're doing on a yearly basis. Typically, I've built it up to 12 years. You want to at least show a loan officer at least 10 years of cash flow. They're going to look at your stabilized year. Stabilized year means that I've leased up my project and now I'm at a stabilized position where I can say this is what I'm going to be making at a minimum without escalations, and you're going to take that stabilized year divided by your cost is what your cash on cost is, and that's a metrics that we all look at to decide if we're going to go forward with a deal or not. IRRs are mostly focused on by investors and folks that want to sell projects. When you're holding on to projects, it's more cash on cost and cash on cash. You want to know how much you're going to generate, how quickly you're going to get your cost back is really the focus of if you're holding on to a project. So this is my stabilized year. As you can see, I've pulled all this information from the data input tab. There's my rent concession, my occupancy, I have all my operating expenses by unit, my debt service here at the bottom. Another thing to look at is your operating margin. That's about where it should be. You want to make sure that your, what this is doing is it's looking at your net income. Over your gross income. So you can see how much of it is actually how you're operating, basically. Down below is your debt amortization. And I'm also calculating my operating deficit, which is something that shows up on my development cost. The same tab is shown on a monthly basis. This is going out for 12 years. There's my operating expenses. And here you can really see what the operating deficit is by month. All I'm doing is putting this credit that you see here where we're not covering our expenses because our lease up hasn't gotten to where we want it to be. This number, the 61,000, is thrown into your development costs. And that is something that loan officers do allow. They'll know that that's what that's for. The next tab shows you how I calculate the occupancy. So I'm showing based on the move-in dates what my occupancy is, and to the point where I reach. In this case, I've said that 87% is going to be my stabilized month. So you can see here how this asset is stabilizing right here. I'm also calculating my free rent calculation here. So over the first 9 months, I'm giving away basically for the occupancy of 23 units, I'm giving them a month of free rent. The next tab is financial loan sizing. So our finances, when it comes to construction loan, we have anywhere from 65% to 80% I've seen where you'll have a loan to cost. So here's where my construction sizing is happening. I'm saying that my net project costs are 7.5. I'm going to finance 5.1 million of it. Down below is the refinancing assumptions. I'm assuming that I'm going to refinance in year 4. And the way that we look at this typically is you look at different things. The bank was going to look at your NOI multiple. This is a typical calculation in the market. You'll say that you can afford to pay at least 10 times your stabilized net operating income. So in this case, it's 6.6 million. You could also look at your loan to value. This varies anywhere from 60 to 75%. 70% is a good rule of thumb to keep when you're modeling. This is saying that based on loan to value, which means I'm looking at my stabilized NOI using a cap rate, coming up with a value, and taking 70% of that, and I'm saying that my possible mortgage could be 7.8 million. Then I'm comparing it to the 6.6 million, and I'm also looking at this debt service coverage. This you can get from a loan officer, what debt service coverage they'll allow. And this is computing 8.6 million. So this is the range that you're going to be able to refinance at. In my assumptions, I usually say we look at the minimum of the 3 is what will populate here. And this is what I'm assuming in the model we're at a minimum going to be able to refinance for in year 4. So that's all the detail. Then we go and we can look at what the presentation tabs look like. This is a dashboard that shows your property performance overall. It has the timing. It has this metrics that I talked about, the stabilized cash on cost. This is your NOI over stabilized, NOI stabilized over cost. You have your development costs. Over here, it shows you, this is a little toggle where you can see how much spend you have over the next couple of months. And down below is pretty much a quick summary of everything that's in the model. You have your net operating income, the mortgage, cash flow available, your cash on cash. Your cash on cash will typically be, should be higher than the cash on cost. You have your equity going in, your loan balances, your cumulative return on investment, which is pretty much your investment minus what you've been able to get from your cash flow over time. As you notice here, by year 2026, we've regained what we've invested in the project, and now we're making this much in cash every year going forward. Your equity multiple looks at it more as a, what am I getting for the value? So it's looking at more about, it's looking at the property value minus the loan, and then it's saying, how much am I getting back for my investment? Like in this case, the 1.84 means I've gotten back my 2.4 million, and then I've made 0.8 over that in my investment so far. And that's why you see over time that this number is going up. Down below, we have just the summary of IRR calculations that I showed you earlier. And that, I think, gives a good picture of what the project looks like without looking at all the details. The other worksheet that I have is a project schedule. This is something that we put in packages. Loan officers like to look at it. We also have investors that want to look at that just to show what your cost spread is over time. And that's all the tabs. Now, Greg, do you have some questions that you want to go through?
Yeah, let's go back, go back to the beginning here. And yeah, I think that was awesome. Great high-level overview of the model. So one thing to keep in mind is this you put together for this presentation based on a project. So this is totally customizable for anybody when they engage. You can build this thing out however they want to look at it, right? So like if I wanted that schedule that you just had placed on the dashboard, you could just move that over and put it in the dashboard. So I have a one-page presentation that shows everything, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
okay,
totally customizable.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're back to the beginning. So some of the things that I really like about this is the way you've got your unit mix broken out so that, if somebody wanted to, and this is a 250 unit development, and they wanted to literally list every unit, lease update projections, and, all of that, they could literally do that, or they could just do, like you have it summarized on the side where you have, 51 bedrooms, 62 bedrooms, 53 bedrooms, and just kind of however they want to do it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And if someone had a 200 or something, or a 400 unit building, what I would do is not do it this way, but there's another way to do occupancy where you don't need all these move-in dates at this level at this time. You could always leave it in here for later when when you get closer to actually doing the lease up, and you can keep track of how your occupancy is actually doing in real time. But during construction, when you're not going to have all this information, there's another way to build something in this model that's really quick to change how the occupancy is calculated.
Yeah, or phase it out by the building. So let's say you have a multi-building site, maybe you've got 50 buildings with, 20 units in each building or whatever. You could phase it out if you're going to build them out and lease them up as they finish along.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome.
Do you have anything on the development costs?
Cool. So development costs. So this is high level. Again, this is, as a developer, generally you're going to be hiring a general contractor or a CM firm, construction management firm, that's then going to engage the general contractor on your behalf. So this model, we're not drilling down into the line item cost for the hard cost of construction. This is all just high level, hard cost, soft cost, things like that. But if somebody, we're a vertically integrated development firm where they are self-performing, then you could insert or have another tab that breaks down the construction cost into the line item details, correct?
Yes, that's a good point, actually. Typically what we would do is this line item here is what would be the top level information of a backup worksheet that we've gotten from a general contractor that has all the detail of the contract itself.
Yeah, and like we said before, if you notice this model, we do have a construction contingency, which is, again, unforeseen things, whereas in the line item general contractor, your escalation of the construction costs are going to be built into the GC's model on that So you would not see, like in the one pager, escalation and contingency broken out here because the escalation is packed into GC.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We always leave it up to the GCs for when it comes to escalations.
Right. All right. What else did we have on that? You scroll down.
Here I could also say like the A&E. Sometimes you don't know right away what the architect is going to charge you. It's typically a percentage of hard costs. You could almost guesstimate what that number is going to be.
Right.
Anywhere from 4 to 7%, you could plug that in and then talk to an architect about, getting that more firmed up.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I like this because you've got it broken down where you've got some FF&E in there and all that kind of stuff for your common areas and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this again could be changed, customized. You don't have to use all these line items as well.
Yep. And for people, that are watching FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, so in your common areas, you're going to have furnishings, you're going to have gym equipment, you're going to have, miscellaneous items in your leasing office, depending on the size of the property, things like that. So you'll have some FF&E that your GC is not going to include. So there's going to be a number of things that you're going to have to separate out from your general contractor cost.
Yeah, and that's typically called soft cost in the market.
Right.
Then you'll always have some legal fees.
Yep, and then ramp up. Of course, you're always going to have some ramp up fees and things, and stuff like that to get the project up and running.
Another thing that's important is real estate taxes.
Yeah.
Always make sure to look at what's going on in the market, because especially if it's a piece of land that you're looking at, look at what's going on in the market and make sure that you get this number right. You can really throw off things you will get an assessment once you're built, and you're going to be paying a lot more once that construction is done. So be careful about this number as well.
Yeah, and that needs to be vetted with the, municipality or district that you're operating in, because, they could be assessing you at full, stabilized retail value, or they could be assessing you at a percentage of that cost or full cost. So there's any number of ways that they do that all over the country. So you definitely want to drill down into that and make sure that and they're going to base that on, largely either, the appraised value that they do on their own. They could base it on the construction permit, the value that you're allocating to the construction permit. So you just want to make sure that you know what that is, because that's huge. Insurance is another one. Obviously you've got builder's risk and things like that, but once we're stabilized, you might have to pay a whole year's worth of insurance premiums up front for the stabilized insurance.
That's true. That's a good point. And on the real estate as well, some jurisdictions, depending on how your land was zoned, you have to be careful that sometimes they won't change. Let's say you have something that's office/residential, and you decide to build a residential building, but it was zoned and taxed as an office parcel. You want to be careful that you may be hit with a bigger bill until they switch it over to residential. I've seen that happen as well.
Yeah.
And the development fee as well. This, when it comes to REITs, this covers all of our overhead. So this number could be 6 or 7%. Typically for smaller firms, I've seen where they'll lower this number so that they'll make their numbers work, because it's actually just a fee. So just keep in mind, this could be just a fee, or it could cover actually a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
And here's the operating deficit that I talked about before. This is the cash flow, our negative cash flow that we have at the beginning before we lease up. That's where that shows up.
Yeah, that's great to factor that in, because that is a cost of the project to get developed that a lot of people forget about.
Yeah, and that's sometimes
they think interest costs, but they don't think, negative cash flow while you're stabilizing and ramping up.
Yeah, and this is just a 27 unit building. When this goes up to 250 or 300 units, that number is usually a really big number, and we end up really vetting that out.
Yeah, I mean, just 10x on this is 270 units. That's $600,000. So that's a big number.
Exactly. Yep. So the cost spend also.
Yep, I like this. So this, for a lot of people, this is draws. So everybody wants to know, how is the money going to go out, including your developer fee, because you're not going to get that up front. That's going to bleed out generally as the project progresses. So I love this cash flow and draw schedule. This is critical for lenders, investors. Everybody wants to know, how's the cash being used and how is it and when is it going out?
That's right. And then as you go forward, you could actually hard code all, over all of this with your actuals if you really want to see how your cash flow is going. We typically would do it month by month and then just respread it until you get to the end of your project.
Well, some lenders require that, right? They require you to update your draw requests so they can see the project cycle as you go.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So they're not going to just give you X amount of dollars each month. They might say, send me your updated costs, and then they're going to allocate as you go along. So a lot of people think they're going to get a lot of money front loaded here. And the lenders are, especially right now, they're drilling down into the details on a lot of these. So that's a great tool right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Even in big corporations, it doesn't matter if you're small or, even REITs, they would have to do specific draws and show exactly what you've spent and exactly what you want your money for. It's they're very tough out there. And this is just a typical profit and loss statement that you can use not only
So P&L, pretty standard there. And then you've got the P&L broken down by month. Pretty standard stuff there. Again, customizable. However, I love the lease up. You've got that broken out so people can really drill down into some details on the lease up. That's a valuable tool there, especially, looking at it down to, which unit puts us at stabilization. I love that. Like you can pinpoint the unit, that puts you over the hurdle.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Now on returns. So on the return metrics, does this have a tool in there for refi and hold? So you pull your equity out, pay them off and then adjust the returns based on a refi, return of capital and hold moving forward?
What I have right here is I've put here's the refi assumption in year 5, and it shows where your equity multiple is at that point. Now this could be built all sorts of ways depending what you're trying to do. If you're trying to refinance it and then you have partners or waterfalls or anything like this is all could be customized. All I'm showing here is the refinancing assumption and the cash coming in and what it does to your return on investment. Right.
Which at that point can be turned into a whole different project. So right now we're developing as a merchant to build and sell and or refi. So if we have investors that are on board through refi, then we can return equity. Now it's a new project moving forward, and your model could contemplate that for me as the owner developer continuing forward once I've paid everybody out.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you can see how your return on investment is ramping up after that refi.
Yeah. Awesome.
And even this project schedule here, what you can do is not only show the project schedule, but I could also build, let's say I wanted to give this to a loan officer, I would pull my construction draw from the other tab and just plug it in right here and just send that to them.
That'd be a great idea, especially on that dashboard where you have the schedule and the draws, allocated to it on a graph so they can kind of look at it. That would be pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay.
Well, cool. Well, I think we have covered it all. And, did you have anything else, Marina, that you wanted to add, or you feel pretty good?
I feel pretty good. I think we covered quite a bit of basis, considering the two models.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, I appreciate you doing this today, and Mason will wrap it up for us and tell everybody where they can find this and download that model.
Great, absolutely. Thank you, Greg, for providing the questions here and the format, and Marina, thank you so much for sharing your models and your expertise. So many details in here. As you can see, there's thousands and thousands of inputs, right, on any project here, and it's critical that you get each one of those right along the way. If we're talking 27 units or 270 units, every detail here has an impact on all the other players down the road, right? And so having expertise on your project is really necessary. You shouldn't be trying to do it alone. As Greg mentioned earlier on, you want to build a team, build people who are experts at what they do, like Marina, experts at underwriting these ground up models and having all the assumptions and all the updates in there. And so the best place to go and hire a team, essentially, flexible for your projects and your deal flow, is Bullpen. So bullpenre.com is the best place to go. Greg will provide a link out to the post that'll have the one-pager model available for download. You can also on that page get on and hire Marina through our process. And so you can bring her onto your projects and have her expertise working on your team, not just in the walkthrough here, but right on your team. And so if you're looking to scale up with expertise, or you're kind of overwhelmed with deal flow, a lot of projects out there, bullpenre.com is the best place to go and find top tier talent across commercial real estate. So Marina, thanks so much for sharing your expertise here, and really looking forward to having people engage with you and engage with us at Bullpen. So thank you, Greg, again for walking through this as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for doing this today and having us here. And you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.